emails. Okay. All right. Well, we are all present and accounted for, I think, but we will do a roll call just to make sure it's clear on the record who is here for board members. I want to welcome everybody to today's LMF meeting. In particular, I'd like to welcome Mac Hunter to his first board meeting, even though he's listened in and participated. He's now a confirmed and voting member. So welcome aboard, Mac. It's great to have you. We're going to just jump right into the agenda. I know it's a snowy day, and technically the state is not open. So here we are doing the state's business when we're closed. So that just shows the dedication, I guess.
Yep.
We'll move right along to agenda item number 2, which is the minutes. Actually, before I do that, I'm sorry. Could staff just do a roll call just so we can have on the record the board members present?
Yes, Barbara Trafton. You'll all have to unmute yourselves because I, again, very aggressively muted everybody.
Here.
Bob Myers, thank you.
Here.
Catherine Robbins-Halstead.
Here.
Roger Burley.
Here.
Jim Norris.
Jim actually just called me. He said he was having some network trouble and might have to log off and get back on.
Oh, okay, because I see him muted here. Thanks, Jason. Commissioner Mac Hunter.
Here.
Commissioner Camuso.
Here.
Commissioner Beal.
Here.
And then Commissioner Kelleher.
Here.
And Jim Norris, are you back yet? Sounds like not.
Well, I think the record can reflect that Jim Norris is present, having technical difficulties, and will confirm that he can hear and participate as we go through the meeting. And Sarah is saying I'm having difficulty with the slides, which is not good, but hopefully that we'll be able to sort that out as well. We're going to roll right.
Can you see the slides? Can you see
I
the
see
slides?
the first one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
We're going to move right into the agenda, which the first item of business is to approve the January minutes. Have members of the board had an opportunity to review the minutes?
Yes, so moved.
Any changes? We have a motion to accept by Roger Burley. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Barbara Trafton. Any comments or questions in regard to the motion, in regard to the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to say to Sarah that I think the minutes are much better this time. They seem much more on point and, you know, very accurate, as opposed to in the past when they seem to include a lot of extraneous conversation.
Yeah, thank you for that, Barbara. Actually, Sarah and I just talked about that this morning. This is a good format, I think, for us to continue to follow. It captures the business of the meeting, and I think the good thing is, if there was ever any question, we do have the recording from these remote meetings that we could fall back on. So appreciate that comment. Do any members of the board? Well, let me ask one more call for Jim Norris. Jim, can you hear us? You may be muted, Jim. Can you see him on the screen, anybody?
No.
Okay. So the record will reflect then that Jim Norris is not present. So is there any opposition to the approval of the minutes? Hearing no opposition, those present are in support of approval of the minutes, so they are approved by consensus. So we're going to move right along to project number 3, which gets us into the meat of the board meeting this morning, which is a project to be acted on, which is the Kennebec Highlands, the Vienna Mountain, York Hill, Kennebec and Franklin counties. And I'm going to turn it right over to Jason to go through the slides.
Thank you. So yes, this was just acted on, so I will not take up any of the board's time rehashing the whole project. The appraisal was submitted to us just as soon as they got the preliminary approval, and the appraised value was $875,000 across 3 parcels. which the AOC accepted without reservations. So we have a draft motion here to approve that.
Great, thank you, Jason. Do we have any comments from the any members of the AOC? No comments from the AOC. We have a draft motion on the board. Would anybody like to make that motion?
I move to approve the recommendation of the LMF Appraisal Oversight Committee and accept the appraiser's value of $875,000.
Great,
And I'll
thank you.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Actually, we don't need a second for a committee
okay.
motion. We don't need a second for a committee motion. Do we have any questions or comments regarding this? I see Laura Rose Day raising her hand. Laura, would you like to comment to the board on the project?
Now, actually, if I'm raising my hand, I'm not intending to, but I just appreciate the great work that the staff has done, both at BPL and LMF on this project, and very much excited about the moving forward.
Great, thank you. So we have a motion in front of us, and hearing or seeing no other hands in regards to questions or comments. I'm going to read into the record the motion by Bob Myers. The committee motion needs no second. The motion is to approve the recommendation of the LMF AOC committee and accept the appraised value of $875,000. We still do not have Jim Morris present on the screen. Is there any objections from the members from the board members present? Seeing no objections and letting the hearing music playing in the background, the motion passes without objection. Thank you very much. So we are going to move right along now regarding the allocation of conservation and recreation funds with the project. So that's Jason, you're continuing on.
That's right. So the public notice was posted in the Kennebec Journal on February 12th. We have not received any comments at the LMF office. And I think the next slide is a draft motion to make that final award. There it is.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments, or does anybody on the board like to let's deal with the board members. We got a couple hands that have gone up, but let's get a motion on the board and then I'll go to staff.
Is there supposed to be a slide up? All I am seeing is the initial slide.
Yeah, Barbara, there's a slide up that shows Kennebec Highlands, and it shows a draft motion.
It does, and Liz has her hand up, and I think what she's going to say is that dollar amount is incorrect, which it is, and I apologize for that. So let me just very quickly get the correct dollar amount for you.
Thank you. I was panicking there.
Yes, I apologize. That is entirely on me. Bear with me. Yes, the dollar number should be $437,500.
I'd like to confirm the allocation, make a motion to confirm the allegation of $437,500 in LMF CNR funding to support the acquisition of the Kennebec Highlands, Vienna Mountain, and York Hill project, subject to standard conditions.
I'll second that.
We have a motion by Bob Myers, seconded by Roger Burley. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none. Jason, can you give me the amount again, please?
$437,500.
Okay.
Liz and Laura, that is correct, right?
Yes.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Perfect. Seeing no other hands, just to read the motion back into the record. The motion is to confirm the allocation of $437,500 and LMF CNR funding to support the acquisition of the Kennebec Highlands, Vienna Mountain, and York Hill projects, subject to standard conditions. Is Jim Norris present?
He appeared and then he disappeared. He is not at the moment present.
Okay, let the record show that Jim Norris was not present for this vote. All those present, are there any objection to the motion? Motion passes without objection from members present. Thank you very much.
Pat, before we move on, who seconded that motion?
Roger Burley.
Thank you.
And Jason, on to the stewardship fund.
I think we actually had a staff discuss this yesterday and decided that this would be better taken up by the board at its March meeting. There's some details with it need to be resolved administratively on how this is going to get handled.
Okay, so, but there will be a request for stewardship funds that we can deal with at a future board meeting. Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, great. All right. Well, we made quick work of that. I want to thank the board and I want to thank all those who worked on this. Is a great project, and I appreciate all the hard work and the quick turnaround by the AOC. So nice to see those projects moving forward quickly. Item number 4 is the LMF call for proposals on working forests, and Sarah Demers is going to take this one.
Great. I'm going to do just a brief introduction on working forest. We will go to the working farmland, and then the board action will come after the farmland presentation. So this is just a brief overview on the farmland, on the forest portion. So here are the dates in front of you that we're looking at for an RFP published March 1st. And we have this keyed up to go into the Kennebec Journal, the Sun Journal, the Portland Press Herald. And I think that's it for this RFP. The dates in front of you are for both the working forest and working farmland. And it shows you when proposals are due and when finalists are selected. And you will see these dates again later on, so you don't have to memorize them, but it gives you a sense of what we're looking at here. And in terms of working forest, so this is the first time that in my memory or my knowledge that the board has issued a call specifically for working forest projects. We thought it would be a good opportunity to provide as much opportunity for the applicant community to come in and request funding. The board made it clear that they wanted lots of opportunity and lots of opportunity to expend the funds. So adding this is something we're trying out, and it's sort of we'll see how it goes. We will use the existing round 10 workbook, which the board adopted in last October. So we do not need to take any board action to adopt a workbook. We will use the existing guidelines we have and have used for round A and B solicitations. As I pointed out in your packet, in the memo, we can expect projects that are working forest easements, community forests, watershed and public water supply protection, as well as deer wintering area projects. And that's just a sample. It's not limited to that. But what does need to be present in any application is the fact that this really is a working forest. That active management of the property is one of the primary intended uses. And I didn't think there was any need to specify between statewide significant or community conservation projects. I think both are appropriate under this working forest theme. So that is, the board could certainly choose to prioritize one or the other, but my sense is there is plenty of opportunity at both scales. And then I just wanted to remind you, I know Roger has asked for this, and it may be helpful to others as well. This is the RFPs that we will be issuing for conservation and recreation funding. You'll see the total at the bottom here, $12,650,000 is 2 years worth of conservation and recreation funding. For statewide significant projects, the board allocated 3 million. We have a 10B round open with proposals coming in May that the board will allocate funds to. And then this working forest round will have funds allocated in September. So this is just a check-in for you to be reminded that we have a total of 12.6 million available and 3 million has currently been allocated. Happy to take any questions. Really just a reminder for you all on the status of funds.
Any questions for Sarah, either on Working Forest RFP or the status of funds? Seeing no question, we do need to take board action to issue a call for proposals.
I'm hoping we can do that after farmland. We've bundled it into a single motion.
That is fine with me. It'll be clear either way on the record. So if you've got a single motion, we can then, if there's no questions on Working Forest, we can move on to farmlands. Seeing no questions, I'm gonna now turn the floor over to Commissioner Beal, I think, who wants to discuss the farmland proposal.
Sure, yeah. Oh, sorry. I
said proposal. I meant to say farmland program. My apology.
That's okay. I can get us started. Alex Redfield is here from the Bureau of Agriculture, Food and Rural Resources, who has a presentation as well. Just before I jump in, Sarah, was there any kind of a preliminary overview that you wanted to do, or should we just dive right in?
You should dive right in.
Got it. All right, I will do that then. Well, I just wanted to start out first and foremost by saying thank you so much to LMF staff and to Bureau of Agriculture staff, and particularly Alex Redfield, who is still relatively new in his role and really just jumped right into this work and has done a great job of trying to really put some form around this new program that we're standing up. I also want to express great appreciation to our organizational partners and practitioners of farmland protection and those folks with real boots on the ground for giving us some really valuable feedback along the way. I think our goal here is really to stand up a program that meets the needs of all of our stakeholders, as well as the interests of the LMF program and state statutes, and also just really lay out a clear process and set of parameters for all involved in farmland protection, as that's really critical for successful projects. I really think what's being presented today, what you'll be hearing more about from Alex, is a great start that we can continue to improve on over time. And I just want to note a few things before I turn this over to Alex. As most of you know, before I came to the department, I had the opportunity to spend about 4 years working at Maine Farmland Trust, first in policy and then as president and CEO. And during those 4 years, I had the opportunity to meet a number of farmers at different stages in their journey to protect their farmland, and also to see firsthand what an intricate process land trust staff had to undergo to take a project from beginning to end. Farmers can be motivated to protect their farmland for a number of different reasons, because they have a deep love of the land that they have worked for decades, or to make the purchase of farmland more affordable on the front end of a farming career, to access equity to make farm improvements or pivot to a new kind of production, or to enable a generational succession. And sometimes it's a combination of several of these reasons. What I will say is that no two projects are exactly alike, and oftentimes it requires navigating through very personal circumstances that may involve multiple family members. It takes really caring, compassionate, and dedicated people to work through a farmland protection project. And we're very fortunate to have a number of people in the state who embody those traits and are very committed to this work. I also wanted to talk for a moment about development pressure on farmland. It is extremely high in some parts of our state. yet it does exist virtually everywhere, even in some of the furthest reaches of the state. Believe me, I've seen it. And this pressure is only increasing. And the important thing to remember, and Alex might emphasize this as well, is that our best agricultural soils are a finite resource. And the reality is that the clock is ticking ever faster for us to ensure that we maintain a robust farmland base. And for that reason, I am incredibly grateful that we have the opportunity to invest in this work. And for those who have followed the work of the Maine Climate Council, you likely also know that we have a real opportunity to advance some of the goals articulated in the Climate Action Plan through our work here. In particular, there is a goal to increase the amount of food consumed in Maine from state food producers to 30% by 2030 through local food system development. And the relationship there is that, rather than exporting our carbon footprint while we import the majority of our food, we have an opportunity to really control the practices and make sure that we're using climate smart practices to produce food. And that will benefit us in many ways in years to come. The other goal that is relevant is that there is an interest in increasing by 2030 the total acreage of conserved lands in our state to 30% through voluntary focused purchases of land and working forest or farm conservation easements. You may have heard the number that we're currently hovering at about 20%, but when you break it down, all things are not equal. We've actually protected less than 5% of our best farmland here in Maine. And to give you some perspective, most other New England states range between having protected 12 to 14% of their farmland, other than New Hampshire, which is about where we are. So with that said, we have a great amount of work to do in this space, but we also have a lot of opportunity. And so I will, with that, turn it over to Alex to walk us through the fine points of the Farmland Protection Program.
Thanks, Commissioner Beal. Good morning, everybody. Nice to be looking at one quick picture of fall in Turner on River Rise Farm before looking out the window and seeing a blizzard, but let's stick with this for one more second. The goal of today's presentation is to provide a little bit of a reorientation to board members on the state of farmland protection in Maine, and then to introduce how LMF staff and Bureau staff have designed this program to be effective at identifying and protecting and supporting farms moving forward into the future. I think the last farm easement project that the LMF board tackled was in 2017. So we're going to start with a fairly broad overview of the sort of state of farmland in Maine, and then move into the details of the program at the sort of tail end of the presentation. So here is the core of the statute at the design of the Working Farmland Access and Protection Program. It was passed in 2021, and it's pretty straightforward. It's designed to support the work that Commissioner Beal just mentioned. In the statute, it does codify some scoring criteria that we had to include and are excited to include in the program design, and it does spell out a different process for application review. And we'll come back to the bones of the program later on in the slides. Great. So a quick little note on what we're trying to protect with these dollars and these programs. So the American Farmland Trust has what they call a PVR rating of agricultural land. It's an assessment of productivity, versatility, and resilience. And it's what the American Farmland Trust uses to essentially differentiate between high quality farmland that we really need to prioritize protection and other cropland. And 49% of the land in Maine is high on that scale. So that means that the ag land that we do have is valuable. It has the potential to produce a lot of food for Maine, for the regional and national economy, And it's also, as Commissioner Beal said, in jeopardy of development, mostly to conversion from low density residential development, although we're seeing more urban development creep into some of these high quality areas of farmland as well. So at the core of this is trying to make sure that this high quality land in particular, but all sort of potential food production space has the potential moving forward to ensure that our agricultural economy, our rural communities, and our food system can remain viable even as that development pressure continues to ramp up. Hearing that small laptop screens are the sort of mode of the day, this chart may not be super helpful, but I'm happy to link it after the meeting. This is another publication from the American Farmland Trust that's sort of mapping out where that high quality land is, the green dots, and the yellow and red dots, which are almost imperceptible, but that's land that was converted in the 15-year period from 2001 to 2016. And you'll note that Maine is in the top 5 of states that lost the most farmland in that 5-year period from 2012 to 2017. Making sure this resource is available for all of those reasons that we mentioned before, but just to list out again, community food security, rural economic impact and employment opportunities. And there were about 30,000 people that worked on farms or owned farms in 2017. And multiple ways of addressing statewide and departmental climate goals. It's all tied up into this one project, and we're really excited about the impact that we have the potential to bring forward. The mechanisms that we're currently using for farmland protection are primarily through conservation easements. Again, to put that in perspective, about 500,000 acres of high quality farmland. And to date, LMF funding has protected just over 6,000 acres. So there's a lot more work to be done. There are a few cases statewide of fee ownership from land trusts, some very prominent properties in the state, like the Crystal Springs Farm in Brunswick and Broadturn Farm in Scarborough. Those are owned outright by land trusts, but predominantly it's easement acquisition that's being used to protect these properties. There are lots of other tools being tested or that have been adopted regionally to sort of maximize the impact that conservation dollars can have on farmland protection. An example is other states in the region are tying farm viability grants to easement acquisition, so supporting the farm as it moves into this protected state moving forward. And we're excited about how this program structure can be adopted now and hopefully evolve to really use best practice from other states in maximizing the impact here. Another goal in our sort of the tools that we're using is synchronizing this program with the NRCS Farmland Protection Program. That ASAP-AL program is used pretty often by applicants to generate the match funding that's needed. So we can, in this cycle and in future cycles, really focus in on making sure that the timelines match up and the easement language is all copacetic. I'm going to talk a little bit about the different considerations that we have to account for when prioritizing projects for protection. I think really focusing on the viability of the farm as a self-sustaining business is a really key consideration. We need to make sure that the bones are there for a farm and a farm business to remain functional and profitable well into the future. Even as things shift around it, focusing on the core of the property, both in terms of soils and in terms of infrastructure and proximity to markets. Those are all things that we're trying to factor into the scoring criteria in this workbook. Sort of mentioned the diversity of benefits that farmland protection brings, so we're trying to codify that in the text of the program. And then this bullet point here about the changing nature of agriculture is a really important one. You know, easements are designed to protect a property in perpetuity, and farms change. Different technology, equipment, market pressures are all evolving over time. So walking that line between a really permanent document and permanent tool to make sure this land exists forever that is also flexible enough to accommodate those shifting circumstances both on and around a farm is a really challenging target to hit. And I guess it's also important to note that there's a really big difference in how properties are transferred, how we need to think about that future transfer in farmland protection work for two reasons. One, it's pretty common for Maine farmers who aren't, raking in the cash during their years of operation to view the equity they build in their land as their retirement. And so we need to think really hard about making sure that there's a way for current landowners to get equity out as they transition out of their operation, while making sure that the land doesn't necessarily go to the highest bidder, because the highest bidder is often development rather than continuing in ag production. And we need to make sure that there's a pathway for new and beginning farmers to access that land. The average age of farmers in Maine is still well over 65, and the opportunities for new farmers with limited capital to access land are limited. So trying to make sure that that farm is affordable when it does get sold is a really key policy goal and structural consideration for the design of the program. I think I pretty much said these things just now, but we'll sort of re-emphasize the fact that the soils are a real consideration here, and they're a finite resource, as the commissioner said. And so making sure that when there are properties that are suitable for supporting many different kinds of operations, that we really sort of prioritize that flexibility that those farms have. Not to say that for example, a blueberry barren is not prime soil, but it still could be a really competitive project and a compelling piece of land to protect. But we just need to consider sort of what is on the ground and not going away as a key feature in our scoring process. Okay, so now a little bit more about the structure of the program. Pulled out 5-ish things that are really key to the design and process of implementing this program. So the first is the sort of order of operations for applications. So similar to other working lands projects, the Bureau of Agriculture will be the designated state agency for these incoming proposals. There will be a review panel selected by Commissioner Beal that will initially score the projects that come in with consultation from other bureaus and LMF staff to make sure we're doing it right. Again, at the last LMF, a couple meetings ago, put out a very casual call to other LMF board members that might be interested in serving on this panel. And I'll just restate that. Would love to have some LMF board participation at the bureau review level. And as I say that, I realize that I have a slide for all of these things, so I should probably just move to the right slide. Here's the review panel slide. I think I covered that. We'll go back to the easement guidelines. This is a new tool that Jason developed, really trying to provide as much clarity as possible early on in the process to what the easement needs to include to satisfy LMF and department priorities. The challenge, as I said earlier, about balancing current operations, potential future operations, and a permanent protection is a really tricky one, and these easements are really complicated. And the more guidance we can provide early on in the process, the better. We'll try to answer questions up front and really highlight to applicants how there are opportunities to connect with bureau staff and LMF staff to figure out what those unique challenges might be that the commissioner mentioned, and we can try to work through them as expeditiously as possible. You'll see the easement guidelines in the workbook, and it does really spell out some pretty clear answers. Well, answers as clear as possible to a lot of common questions that will come up during the process for applicants. Another big change is an opportunity for applicants to exclude the farmstead area. So Jason and Sarah have shared that the vast majority of time spent in negotiating easement terms and interpreting easements after they've been acquired revolve around how the homestead or farmstead area is used and what appropriate use and developments are. In the interest to, again, try to streamline this and make it a little simpler for applicants and landowners, there's an optional, applicants have the option to just exclude the farmstead area from the easement, providing a lot more flexibility with how farmers use their homestead area or the building envelope. Some of the things that are prohibited on the farmland are allowed in the farmstead area, and so applicants have the opportunity to still do some of the things that might contribute to the viability of their business, building a farm stand, adding some energy generation capacity, signage, parking, without needing as much oversight and approval from LMF and Bureau staff. Here's a change. We have removed the favorable scoring for public access in the working farmland program. The thinking here is that public access may not be appropriate for farms of all sizes and types, whether they're growing high value or sensitive crops, and public access might be a risk to food safety plans and certification, or heavy equipment is being operated. All these things are real and potentially considerations that might impact the overall viability of the farm. And we didn't want to penalize farms where public access could jeopardize or make their operation more challenging. Our point of view is that the benefit that the public gets can be generated in a lot of other ways, from a more resilient food system to the preservation of a community's agricultural character. And there are options for the applicants to include public access if trails or any other type of public access is a benefit, then folks can always include that in the easement, and we're happy to work with them as they move forward with that question. The next 3 points, new and underserved farmers, climate change, and management plans are new in this workbook, spelled out in, well, this one is spelled out in statute, and we're approaching them in a really similar way, so I'm grouping them together. Supporting new and underserved farmers is obviously a goal of the department. We were thinking about affordability and accessibility for new farmers, but trying to have a soft touch in how applicants and landowners decide how, if and how they can support new and beginning farmers. We're not prescribing a way to support new farmers or to support underserved communities, but if an applicant and the landowner have a way to do so, we want to make sure that that's recognized and given points. So we're sort of putting this out there as something that we hope applicants can think about, and we'll review them and try to support their efforts in accomplishing these goals, but trying to see what comes in and work with folks to make sure that it is functional and not overbearing on stewardship capacity. Same with management and climate plans. We're doing a couple things in changing how planning is done on these applications. We're removing some natural resource and stewardship planning requirements that were obsolete or not creating a whole lot of value for landowners, and trying to create some options for folks to develop collaborative ways to protect their resources and to make sure they're checking in with Bureau and LMF staff, but letting folks decide what the best way is to decide how they want to manage tillage, how they want to manage pesticide or fertilizer application and nutrient management. We don't need to specify how that's being managed, but we do want to see it and make sure it's in line with policy goals and best practices. There are a lot of tools being developed that are going to make this a little more clear for folks moving forward. NRCS is doing some work, and internal climate goals and climate practices are being developed. So we hope to be able to provide more content support to applicants moving forward. But for this round, really just inviting folks to think creatively about how they want to work together as an applicant landowner team and steward their resources as best they can. That's the overview of the program. We have two changes that we made to the workbook based on some feedback from land trust partners, that these changes were made after the initial workbook went out. So I want to highlight those before we ask for board action. They're both on page 42, and they're both in the easement guidelines component of the project. The first one is about, initially there was a prohibition on subdivision, and we heard, and it makes sense, that occasionally subdividing might actually accomplish some of that affordability, some affordability goals, if two smaller farms could both be viable and more affordable for new farmers, then we don't want to explicitly prohibit that. So we created a mechanism in the new text to essentially encourage applicants to be in touch with us, and that we might be able to accommodate that if that's something they want to consider in the easement.
Alex, do you mind if I jump in and just provide some broader LMF context to that?
Yeah, great, thank you.
So for board members who maybe have experience with working forest easements, this subdivision allowance is similar. When you're looking at a working unit of forest, many of our easements allow a specific, working forest easements allow a specific number of subdivisions for the same reasons that Alex mentioned, that sometimes smaller units make sense. And so rather than prohibit subdivision, which is what we typically do on all of our conservation and recreation projects, subdivision is typically prohibited. It made sense to think about this more as working units of land and allow the Bureau some discretion in determining whether those subdivisions made sense.
Thank you. The second change on the same page is about structures and improvements on the protected area. We wanted to make sure applicants knew that there's an option if agricultural structures really need to be cited on the easement area, then they can work with us to think about best ways to do that. So applicants that want to build, I don't know, livestock housing near their livestock, that makes a lot of sense. And so we want to accommodate that. That's a conversation we're willing to have. And internally in the review and staff oversight of that question and concern, we can introduce considerations about preserving best soils and safety and access and habitat preservation and all our other goals and considerations. So I just talked a lot really quickly. I know Jason has some additional slides, I think, laying out next steps, but would be happy to talk about content or considerations in the project design either now or after Jason's done.
Yeah, let's talk about the workbook itself before we go to any draft motions. Before I ask for questions from the board, I do have one just for clarity. So if a farm, if a 200-acre farm, it's split between, there's 100 acres of agricultural fields, there's another 200 acres of woods and woodlots, obviously associated with activity on the farm, but the applicant only wanted to put the working farm easement on the fields, the agricultural fields themselves. That's not precluded, is it?
I don't think so. Yeah, the applicant can decide where they'd like the easement to cover. Yeah.
Okay. The way you were describing it, it almost made it sound like it had to be as a whole, and there would be, for like the homestead areas in particular, those could just be left out of any request. There's no quote unquote oversight from LMF board or an easement on those areas.
That's right.
Just
Yeah,
wanna-
that's right. I mean, there may be an advantage for an applicant in including as much acreage as possible, even if it's woodland or non-cropland, because
Yep.
if that contributes to the viability of the project, then we might score that project more favorably. But it's applicant discretion about the boundaries of the easement for our
Great.
consideration.
Great, thanks for that clarity. Any questions from other board members? I've got a couple hands. First up is Catherine, then Mac, and then Barbara. Catherine, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is not to do with the changes, but on the workbook itself, under the environmental concerns, specifically it says that properties must be free from environmental concerns at the time of closing. And I'm wondering specifically how we're addressing PFAs with everything that's in the press right now. Wondering how that will be addressed. Thank you.
Sure. You'll note in the scoring section that there's a list of other considerations that the review panel might consider, and environmental contamination is listed as one of them. So I think the idea is that during the review process, we'd ask the review panel to assess the history of the land, potential for contamination, and if there is a concern, then sort of have to wait and take whatever steps that property is asking for. As science and testing change, we didn't want to prescribe a process or protocol for how we manage an individual project, but did want to make sure that applicants knew that we could consider that, and that could be a factor in decisions about how dollars are spent. I don't know if Jason has, or Sarah, want to add anything else.
I would just add that like we do for the conservation and recreation projects, we can generate a standard map set for every farm project that comes in that shows different protected natural resources. And you'll recall in this last round, we also screened the existing available data sets at the DEP to determine, is the property within 1 mile of a known PFAS site? And the Bureau of Ag obviously has a discretion to use that information or data in the way that makes sense for their projects. But that is something we did for CNR projects, and I imagine the Bureau will want to do something similar for their projects.
Great, thank you. Next question is from Mac Hunter.
Thank you, Commissioner. I want to talk for a moment about the public recreation. I understand the rationale for removing it as a criterion, but two things. One, I wonder if it might be added to other considerations. The list there would seem like an obvious place to at least have it considered. And secondly, I noticed on the inquiry form, Appendix A, it's still listed as the #1 item on the list there. This is page 42 of the board packet, or page 27 of the workbook itself.
Thanks for flagging that. Probably an oversight in the inquiry form, and so we can make an adjustment there accordingly. Yeah, we could. I guess this was a conversation that got a lot of attention internally about how to include public access considerations or how to not include them. And I think the core principle was the goal of this program is to protect working farms, and working farms might have public access and they might not, and prioritizing farms that can include a component of public access may be a detractor from prioritizing farms that have the highest viability. And really wanted to make sure that those farms that had the potential to contribute to the stated both statutory and implicit goals of the program were at the top of the list for sure, and that external factors can be considered, and we can think about if that should be listed as a consideration outside of the scoring criteria officially or not.
Could I add one thing to Alex, your answer? We also had some discussion about parity, and maybe Pat, you could speak to this on the working waterfront, in the Working Waterfront program, but my understanding is that that's not necessarily a criteria that folks are scored on in that program.
Yeah, that's correct. Working Waterfront provides no public access. They're private businesses, private wharfs, and it would be detrimental to the business to create that kind of reliance on public access. Commissioner Beal and I talked a lot about this particular component of and you know, somebody who grew up hunting and fishing on farmlands, they are critical to access, but I also recognize that they are working farms, and because they're working farms, my feeling is that it was right to it's a proper policy move to take it off the scoring criteria. I think, Mac, are you just suggesting that it would be added to kind of other considerations without points?
That's correct. It seems to me a recognition that this is a consideration makes sense. I do understand and support the decision to remove it from the actual scoring. I would just propose having it as listed as a consideration, because it certainly would be if we had that information about a particular project. It's something that people would think about.
Okay. Commissioner Beal, do you want to respond to that concept about just the idea of recognition? So your scoring committee would have that understanding, and then the board ultimately would as well.
Yeah, well, and maybe Alex can speak to this. He's been through this document backward and forward more than I have been, but I mean, certainly it was something that we talked about as being, well, actually Alex mentioned it in his presentation, that if a farm was interested in offering public access, that's something we can certainly work with them on. I guess I'll also say that the vast majority of farmers do allow public access, but a lot of times what they want is to know who's on their land, and so it's by landowner permission. And part of that is so that if they know that there are people that use their land, but they need to be on their land during hunting season or whatever, or to do some kind of application, and it's not an appropriate time for people to be on that land, that they have a way of communicating with somebody that they've granted permission to. So even if it's not stated, you know, or we're not scoring for public access, the reality is that the majority of these farms will probably allow public access.
Mac, does that kind of satisfy your thinking around this? It wouldn't be stated, but certainly is kind of implicit within the program about the benefit to public access.
Well, again, the compromise I was suggesting is simply listing it as a consideration and not having it scored. Yeah. And I haven't heard an argument against that.
Okay. Catherine, is this on the same topic? Go ahead, Catherine.
Yes, I agree and support Mac's opinion that, you know, I actually feel that it should be in points consideration just as like a bonus point structure. And I think that it could be worded such that, and it might even be, as Commissioner Beal had stated, with permission or something along those lines, to protect the farmers, to have the ability to say no, when and where, and know who is coming on their land. But I mean, it is public dollars that's going to this, and I feel that there should be some consideration for public access. I'd like to see it even more stronger than other considerations, but I would be happy to see it in other considerations as well. But I think it should be spelled out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Barbara.
I have some questions, but I just wanted to comment on this too. And I think there are other kinds of public access that actually are very beneficial to the goals that Commissioner Beal outlined of increasing interest in saving farmland and the value of farmland. And I think that some of the public access on Crystal Springs, for example, you know, it doesn't have to be just interfering, you know, with tilling and, you know, the harvesting and things like that. It can be, public access can be taking a goat walk, like at Wolf Neck Farm with the goats, or going to a farmer's market and, interacting with farmers, or going on a birding walk or something like that at a specified time. So these kinds of activities that give visibility to the importance of farmland, I think, should be recognized, besides hunting, fishing, and those kinds of access points. So I support, considering this in some format, because I think it adds value.
Commissioner Beal, I see your microphone went off. Do you want to comment?
Yeah, a couple of things. One is I just want to point out that farms come in all shapes and sizes, right? And some of these farms that we might be looking at protecting might be small farms. They might not have the kind of land base that people are thinking about for recreational trails and whatnot. So I think giving the Bureau of Agriculture, and the reviewers flexibility in looking at a property and looking at whether or not something like that even makes sense as something we would score for, whether it is, I guess I also want to speak to the idea of the bonus points. We did talk about that, but the reality is we're still disadvantaging a farm that doesn't think it's appropriate or doesn't want to, build in public access because they don't have the ability to get those bonus points. I mean, either way, they're not necessarily going to benefit, or they're going to be disadvantaged if somebody else chooses to provide public access. And I just don't think it's a good idea to set up that dynamic. And again, if Alex has more thoughts on that, please jump in.
Yeah, I just had two quick scenarios that are very real and timely, which again sort of led to some hesitation about assigning points, certainly assigning points, or including it as a de facto tiebreaker in the other consideration section. So one is, you've seen the headlines about avian flu, and biosecurity for poultry is a real concern. And if a farm had a biosecurity plan that required that people didn't come on their farm, that could still be the farm that we want to protect with leveraging LMF dollars to do so. Similarly, on my family farm, we sold to Hannaford. Hannaford requires good agricultural practice certification. To get good agricultural practices certification, you need to prevent visitors from being anywhere near your food. So that kind of farm might be the exact kind of thing that hits all of our policy goals. And by including favorable points or favorable consideration for public access, it does create this opportunity for a farm that is even a little bit less viable or impactful to jump ahead in the scoring process. And so I have a lot of sympathy for the public access as a really valuable element, as Barbara mentioned, and as the sort of end benefit for public dollars. And I think the case to be made about how that benefit is generated in other ways, and that we're really targeting these dollars on working farms and making sure that they have every possible opportunity to remain profitable and in control of their decision making is really at the center of it.
So I think we right now, we seem to have some differing opinions around the issue of access. I know that I am, I am a huge advocate for maintaining access, but in the case of working farms and working waterfronts, I do certainly lean towards the discretion of the owners here. So I wouldn't want to see, personally, I would not want to see any sort of a points component here. I think MAC is trying to split the difference just for other considerations that would not have a any kind of scoring component. It would just be more information for the board and for the scoring committee. So I need to get some guidance here on which way we're going to go. Any other members of the board that have not spoken on this topic have a thought?
Commissioner Kelleher, I would just be supportive of the similar process that you just outlined, and certainly we work with many farmers across the state for providing access for a number of issues, but I'm cognizant of that decision is up to the farmers. And so I would be supportive of allowing it as a consideration, but I also don't think we should be adding points, and I wouldn't want to disadvantage other farmers who have smaller properties that don't have the ability to provide public access. So while I fully support public access and would love to see it continued, I think as a consideration would be the best way to go.
Thank you, Commissioner. I've got Bob Myers and then Roger Burley. Bob.
I would certainly be inclined to support some kind of bonus points for the public access component, which is also very important to me. But I could live with max compromise. I think we need to have some kind of consideration in there because, as Catherine said, these are public funds that are being used. And, with that comes an obligation to the public.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. Roger.
Well, I'm just going to go very briefly to farms that I've read about over the years that have made money to survive on in the winter with cross-country skiing. And so I guess I'm falling in the other considerations area, and I'll take one little more moment to digress. I think this whole farmland protection program started with LMF in my earliest tenancy on the board in 2001 or 2002 when Bob Spear was Commissioner of Ag, and it was pretty much a blunt instrument then. This is so much more sophisticated, thoughtful, and well developed than what we were dealing with initiating way back then, some 20 years ago. So I commend all the thoughtfulness that's gone into this. Some evolution over time, but certainly the current work that's going on, I think it's way more challenging and difficult. Avian flu and PFAS and all that stuff. But it's all about the same thing that we really started with 20 years ago or so. And so I'm very appreciative of all the thoughtfulness that's gone into this. That's it.
Thank you, Roger. I want to echo that. I think, this program, I believe the way it is being structured now has come a long way, and I think tremendous work has gone into it. I'm sympathetic to all of the issues that Commissioner Beal and Alex have brought forward. Is there a way to address this under other considerations with a strong policy statement, Commissioner, that would recognize the fact that other considerations around public access are for informational purposes that should not detract or promote how a project would ultimately be scored? Trying to see if there's a way that we could ensure that we create a statement by also ensuring that we're addressing your concerns and needs while also balancing some of the comments by the board members.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, where we're at right now, talking about putting something under other considerations, I think that's something that we can do. Maybe we can work with, Sarah and Jason and Bureau of Ag staff and put something together along those lines if we can come to agreement on generally what folks would like to see reflected.
Yeah, I think while we do have a couple statements that were positive around points, they were both of those statements were followed by support of Mac's kind of compromise approach. And it seems to me if we had within other considerations kind of an asterisk around public access that talked about the policy guidance on how those considerations would be used, might be a good way to kind of thread the needle here.
Yep.
I think an affirmative statement that, access will not be guaranteed and offered only at the landowner's discretion. You know, I think there are ways that we can provide some affirmative language that helps the applicant and landowner kind of understand, as well as the scoring committee, what the intent here is.
Yeah, I think it's critical that any statement be clear that the farm owner has ultimate say in access and what type of access. Okay. Is the board comfortable? Well, let's put a placeholder here, because I want to make sure I want to see if there's any other issues with the program that we need to have more thoughtful conversation on, and if not, is the board going to be comfortable making a determination to approve this with the caveat that we need to develop that policy statement? Commissioner Camuso.
Thanks, Commissioner. I just wanted to, and I'll be comfortable with this, what Sarah just proposed, but I just wanted to sort of throw this out there for folks to think about. And we are talking about public dollars, but in my experience, both here in Maine and on some of the national boards I serve on, when we survey the public, the number one and number two priorities for the public are clean water and view sheds. So aesthetics are always, you know, in the top three. Third is usually healthy fish and wildlife populations. So I would argue that preserving farmlands and agricultural areas do provide tremendous public value aside from the food production. So I think the view sheds are critical to our landscape here in Maine. And I think that in and of itself is a good use of public dollars. So I just wanted to go on the record saying that I think the people of Maine and our constituents would support that opinion. Great.
Thanks, Judy. I appreciate those comments. Let's just put a placeholder on this this conversation and open it up for any other comments regarding the farmland program. Barbara. You're on mute, Barbara, if you are talking.
I'm trying to talk. I'm trying to be seen. I don't know if I'm being seen yet, but that's...
You're not being seen, but we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, great. So over the past decade, I have had the opportunity to sit down with a lot of farm owners, along with a member of the Maine Farmland Trust, and really listen to, you know, their concerns about keeping their land as a working farm and yet having equity as they move into their senior years. And the one thing that I was struck with is the need for flexibility in dealing with these farmers and their farms. And so I was so pleased to read this, and I know Commissioner Beal used the word flexibility, and that was the word that really came to my mind as I read you know, this program. I think it gives a lot of flexibility to the individual farmers. So I congratulate Alex, you on breathing that into this document. I just had a couple of questions. I could guess the answers to these, but I'd rather have you answer them. There's an obvious preference for easements over fee. Is there more here than just financial considerations, making the dollars go further? Is there another set of considerations why easements, in your view, work better?
I think maybe Sarah is better equipped to answer sort of structurally the challenges that fee acquisition would create, or certainly Jason too. I guess I'd mention the sort of the stewardship capacity that a land trust would have to demonstrate in being an owner of a property and having a plan for how to manage that property moving forward is a much bigger ask of applicants than being able to monitor and potentially enforce an easement. So I think, you know, we wanted to include it as something that is possible because there may be some application that is very compelling and demands fee ownership, but we don't really have a protocol to do it yet, and it would have to be a pretty exceptional case the way things are constructed right now.
And I had one other question, and it's you allocated 10 points for the climate adaptation considerations, and I'm particularly interested in this because, as you may know, we formally had only allocated 5 points. And so I just wondered, I think it's your thoughts would be relevant here if we decide to reconsider how many bonus points we were to award for climate adaptation. But what was your thinking about needing a range of 10 points?
Well, I don't, it wasn't a super intentional choice to choose 10 over 5, except trying to balance how important it is, and how important it is both for the project itself and for the broader agricultural economy to incentivize the adoption of some climate mitigation strategies. So, try again, that flexibility concern is real. The recognition that there isn't a really easy and perfect list of tools that we can point a land trust or a farmer to and say, just check these boxes and you get all the points. Wanted to leave it open and really reward folks that are thinking about it and can clearly articulate, even in this ambiguous phase of project development, how they're going to incorporate these considerations and practices into the stewardship of the property in the future. So the sort of allocation of points among all those categories was really trying to extrapolate different values and different priorities from both statutory and departmental goals and putting a number to it. It's our best guess at how that value and priority question breaks down.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I've got Jim Norris, your hand went up and down earlier before Max went up. Did you have a question?
I do. I'm having real difficulty with the program, but I hope you can hear me now.
We can hear you and see you, Jim. Welcome.
Okay, sorry. During the course of reviewing valuations for easements with the program, a practice seemed very obvious especially in southern Maine, where we were seeing comps where, generally speaking, all that was happening was the sale of a kingdom lot, a large, a 200-acre home site, if you will. And yet it was being used as a comp in the process of determining the value of a conservation easement. I'm not sure it was clear in the materials that I read that the new workbook would recognize the potential for limiting fairly intensive agricultural practices if in fact a large farm was purchased by a wealthy, high wealth individual as a kingdom lot, and simply complied with some minimal standards for, pasture and whatever. Am I not seeing that there is some greater demand for more intensive use, agricultural use?
I'll definitely defer to LMF staff on the appraisal process and how we're going to consider different comps. The sort of technicality, definitely, but your question about affirmative agricultural use, essentially, versus ownership and holding of your estate purchase. Yeah, that's another tricky one, and we can look to places like Vermont and Massachusetts, where a tool called the option to purchase at agricultural value is a sort of standard inclusion in easements that those farmland protections offer. That would allow the that would sort of force the sale at the appraised agricultural value of the property, which is appraised differently than the residential kingdom value of the property. That's an option that applicants can include in the program. Maine Farmland Trust has started to include that in a lot of their projects. And it might be a tool that we accommodate or sort of incorporate in future versions of the workbook. But it's not something that we were ready to do on this timeline. And as a landless farmer myself, I am also frustrated at the sort of acquisition of prime properties by folks who aren't farming. But there is still a real policy objective that is being met in those scenarios where that land is protected and preserved, and the option or the potential of that as a food production space persists in perpetuity. It's not great, and there are definitely tools to sort of limit that as an end result of transfer of farmland properties. But we are still, even with this framework, protecting it in any way sort of guarantees and checks a lot of our boxes of policy goals.
Thank you.
Mac, go ahead.
Yes, Barbara's question about the scoring sheet brought to mind a question that I'm very curious about. I'm wondering how this scoring arrangement is different than or the same as what was used last. I think somebody said it's been since 2017 since there's been a farm project approved by LMF. How is this different than what was used back then? I assume there's been some modification, and I'm curious if those modifications were informed by an analysis of where the rubber met the road in earlier farmland evaluations. Were there particular criteria that really tended to separate the wheat from the chaff, to use an agricultural metaphor?
Well, I've only been here since September, so I can't speak to 2017, but I can tell you that the scoring criteria here are all spelled out in statute. It's the requirement from the enabling legislation that articulates what we consider as, well, that defines the core of the scoring, and then we did choose to add optional scoring components above and beyond what statute required. So I don't know if someone wants to comment on lessons learned, but we do have pretty clear guidelines from the legislature about what we need to prioritize and how this program needs to focus its efforts.
Jason, do you want to talk a little bit about, you looked pretty closely at the prior scoring criteria and had a hand in helping Alex with the existing scoring criteria. I can say, to your comment, Mac, we didn't do a real objective analysis of criteria in terms of what worked well and what didn't work well. It was really, however, informed by experience among staff and experience among applicants. So it was a bit more anecdotal, but we did seek that kind of feedback in thinking about changes.
Yeah, so with regard to how this compares to the previous scoring, like Alex said, the primary source for most of these criteria is the statute, which has a list of factors that must be considered in deciding which projects get funded, with some additional ones to accomplish various bureau goals. Most of these were considered in some form in the prior round. There were a couple that were new. The new support for new and underserved farmers is a completely new idea that was added. But I think the biggest changes were just making sure that everything aligned with the Bureau's goals, especially in terms of how many points were being allocated to the different categories. And so to answer your question, was this informed by, you know, which ones were kind of the deciding factors in previous rounds? I don't think so. I think the allocation of points is really about how important is this criteria to the Bureau and the department in terms of deciding where the state dollars go to.
Thanks, Jason. And I just got a text from Commissioner Kelleher. He's lost his Wi-Fi, so I'll step in until he comes back. Mac, do you have a follow-up question, or did you just not take your hand down?
Oh, I'm sorry. I just forgot to take it down.
Okay, all right, just double checking. So we'll move on to Barbara then. And you're on mute, Barbara.
Thank you, Commissioner. I hope this is just a wordsmithing issue, Alex, but I noted on page 60, you referred to the dedicated stewardship fund, but on page 29, you didn't call it a dedicated stewardship fund. And the reason I think it's important whenever we refer to this new opportunity that we use the statutory language, which is dedicated stewardship endowment. And the reason I say that is because an endowment is such a different vehicle. It has very specific legal, financial, and auditing requirements that go along with it. And so I just think we should be consistent and use the statutory language when, and maybe there were other places, Alex, those are the only two I noted it, but just to be consistent, I think that would be good.
Thanks.
Great,
Yeah,
thanks.
we'll make sure that's reconciled. Thank you.
Great, and I'm sorry I dropped off. We had some Wi-Fi difficulties here at the house just for a moment, but I am back. And I do know Commissioner Camuso has to leave a hard stop at 10:45, Judy. So let's see if we can continue to move through this. Is there any other questions of Alex regarding the program? Not seeing any. I want to just quickly go back and revisit the issue around public access before we get into the motions. We have a draft motion that has been prepared by staff. The motion will deal with both working forest and working farmlands, but we have talked about a couple modifications to the work program for working farmlands. So is the board going to be okay with approving these? I think they're minor in my view, the ones that Barbara just pointed out, as well as the development of a policy statement. Is the board okay with approving these basically as amended going forward? And then we, as the policy document is going to be, well, we can shop that around if need be. Catherine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I would be comfortable approving, but it's going to be listed under other considerations more than just a policy statement. I might not be understanding that correctly, but I would like to see it at a minimum reflected in other consideration. Again, I would prefer to see bonus points attached to it, but I would be willing to compromise with other considerations as long as it was, stated that strongly about public access, because I do really believe in that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. That's what I was envisioning. There would be, as Mac had listed or described it, it would be under considerations, kind of with an asterisk with a policy statement that would go along with it. Around working farmlands. But I want to make sure Commissioner Beal is okay with that approach.
Yes, yeah, that would be a good compromise.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. And Catherine, is that okay? Does that describe it accurately? Okay, I see a positive head nod there. Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion, a draft motion up that it would be, we'll have to include as amended today, or as amended. Would any member of the board like to make the motion around call for proposals?
So moved. So moved, Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you, Barbara.
Second.
Barbara, do we have a second?
Second.
Was that, I think that was Roger. So we have a motion by Barbara, seconded by Roger, to issue an RFP for working forest and working farmland projects with the following dates. RFP published 3/1/22. The LOI deadline 4/22/22. The proposals due 7/25/22. And finalists selected 9/27/22. Are there any questions or comments regarding the motion on issuing the RFP? Seeing none. Now with Jim Morris, we have all members present in the board. All board members are currently present. Is there any objection to the motion? Motion passes with no objections. Thank you very much. So now do we have a second proposal, Sarah, a second motion?
Correct. To issue an RFP for working forest projects with the following dates.
And so this would need the as amended language. No, excuse me.
Nope.
This is working forest, excuse me. So
Correct.
I'm not sure why we didn't do this when we had it up last time, but I'll go along with staff. So we have a second, do we have a motion, a draft motion up? Would somebody like to make the motion?
I will make it to issue an RFP for working forest and working farmland projects with the dates on the screen.
We have a motion by Roger, and I think it was seconded by Jim Norris.
Yes.
Thank you, Jim. And so just quickly to read the full motion into the record, issue an RFP for working forest and working farmland projects with the following dates. The RFP published 3/1/22, the LOI deadline 4/22/22, the proposals due 7/25/22, and the finalists selected 9/27/22. Any questions? All board members are present. Is there any objections from the board? Motion passes without objection. And you have one more, Sarah? Okay.
We can move on to staff updates.
Okay, so these motions, the way they were written, I just want to make sure the record is clear that the way they were written did not reflect as amended. So for the record, so it is clear, the working farmland proposal has been amended to include the language that Barbara brought up around stewardships, those two areas, and then the criteria around public access as discussed. So I just want to make sure that is clear for the record. And
Correct.
with that, we can move on to staff updates.
Okay, so just wanted to let folks know that we have posted both a senior planner and paralegal assistant position. We are currently scheduling interviews to add a third senior planner to the LMF staff. We did not get sufficient applications, qualified applications for the paralegal assistant. So we have reposted that for another month, hoping to get some qualified applicants, and I should have an update for you on that in March. These are limited period positions, 2-year limited period positions. And as you'll recall, the board voted to pay for these positions with funds donated to the Land for Maine's Future program. The supplemental budget includes permanent positions for a senior planner and a paralegal assistant, as well as all other funds to help execute the Land for Maine's future goals. So we would have these limited period positions and could then transfer them to permanent positions if those positions are approved by the legislature. And then the supplemental budget also includes some funds to assist for the payment of the Conservation Lands Registry hosting fee. That's a nearly $7,000 annual fee that the department pays in order to host the Conservation Lands Registry. We have not been able to generate sufficient funds to cover that hosting costs on an annual basis. So this is a request to just fund that and not have to scrounge around every June to figure out how we're going to pay that bill. So both really positive and exciting opportunities for the LMF program. Before I move off from staff updates, I want to ask Laura to quickly, I'm going to stop presenting and ask Laura to just walk through a change that she has made to your board packet. We got some feedback from board members that the board packet, when sent as a PDF, is difficult to navigate. So your next board meeting packet will look a little bit different, and Laura is going to show you how to navigate that.
And Laura, before you start navigating for us, please, I just want to make sure it is clear to the board that that is a proposed supplemental budget. So the woo-hoo is a little premature because it hasn't passed yet. So this is what is proposed, and the Appropriations Committee will be taking up the state supplemental budget over the next 2 to 3 weeks. So it's
the
probably
fact that it was the fact that it was identified as a priority alone is a woohoo for me.
Yeah, I agree. So I appreciate certainly want to show appreciation to Commissioner Beal for the inclusion of those in her budget. It's very important. So with that, I'll stop yammering because Judy's got to go and Laura's going to tell us how we're going to navigate from now on.
Thank you very, very much. I'm going to share my screen, and this is for the current set of the agenda and the board packet that you have. Next month, I will create a proper table of contents that you can click through. But in the meantime, and I'll see what you think about this. Let me get to my screen here. Not that. No, thank you. No, thank you. No, thank you. I want this. Here we go. Can everybody see the agenda that I have on my screen?
Yes.
Great. And can you see my little pointy thing? This is on the far left side of your agenda. There's a little arrow. If you click that, you open the side panel, which gives you access to some tools. And this thing that looks like a ribbon is the bookmark panel. If you click that, you will see a set of bookmarks that will take you through your agenda, in your board packet in a cleaner, nicer, more organized fashion. Next time you get your agenda, this will be open. This will be saved so that the default position of your board packet is this view. I will, as I say, also have a table of contents put on, but you can click through to the different sections of your packet by using this side panel. And that's really all I have to say about that. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank God we still cut trees down and make paper. But Mac, go ahead.
Yes, I just stopped sharing, so let me know if you want to put that back up.
Mac, yeah, Mac, go ahead.
Thanks for this. That'll be very helpful when you have a 76-page document to be able to jump through it like that. It's going to be great. I'm wondering if I always struggle with PDFs, and it seems like I get some where I can write comments on them, highlight things for my own purposes and so forth, and others are immaculate and inaccessible to me. And this one seemed more of the latter. Is there a way that I could get PDF versions where I can play with it, mark it up?
I don't know. I can check the security. I don't have this, encrypted in any way. I don't know what the difference is. Maybe it's where you are, your particular Adobe subscription that you're working with in any given laptop or any given environment. It's probably that, because I can do almost anything with a PDF thanks to Sarah putting in our budget that Jason and I get to have the Adobe Pro version. That's why we get to manipulate the way we do. I'm thinking that perhaps I could create Oh, in PDFs, I think you can always do a little comments version. You should always be able to go through your PDF and create comments and little sticky notes.
I looked for that and was not able to do that. I mean, part of the problem is I'm cheap and I'm using the free version.
Right. Well, so now I'm thinking, I wonder if there's something, I'll look to see if there's something I can add that'll give you either a blank page to take, you know, to keep your notes, something I'm sure I can create a form that I add to the packet that'll allow you to write things. But I imagine you'd find it more useful if you could comment in the margins next to the places you're thinking. I don't think I can do anything about that if it's not available in the free cheap version, but I'd be surprised if it's not. And I'll take a look to see if I can figure out how you access that.
Laura, is there any reason the board members couldn't get these documents in a Word version?
I don't think so. It wouldn't come in the same, well, maybe I'd have to move it from PDF back out to Word to get it to be a single packet in the same way, which I can do. And then you absolutely can, you know, manipulate as you wish. That I can absolutely do that. Sarah, is there any reason why I shouldn't do that?
Well, we've avoided having Word documents out there so that things that are not yet board policy don't get edited, circulated, and sent out accidentally to the public. So it's really intended to ensure that what is a draft doesn't accidentally end up with someone else before it's adopted with the board. So that has been the practice, is to just send PDFs to avoid that kind of thing happening.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly understand that piece, but I mean, I saw a few other heads kind of nodding when Mac was talking about how he was dealing with it. I still take a hard copy and write on them prior to the meeting, so this doesn't impact me. But if there are, you know, if there is a need to have something that is editable, if you will, by a computer, and there's multiple board members, then having a way to address that's great. So maybe just Laurie could look into it a little bit more.
I will absolutely do that, and I'll be happy. And I kind of enjoy this kind of thing, so.
As you watch the ice flow by. I'm happy to be your guinea pig. If you want to send versions to me to play with, I'm happy to help you with.
That would be ideal, Mac. Then I'm not boring everybody with my own particular idiosyncrasies. And thank you very much. We'll ship it. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Barbara, your hand's up.
I just have a question for Sarah. I think all of us experienced technical difficulties during this, so I may have missed this. Are we deferring the discussion on stewardship to the March meeting?
Yes.
And did we not allocate any stewardship funds today?
That's correct. We essentially tabled that to the March meeting. We were hopeful that we could pull together enough quality information for the board to make a vote today, but just ran out of time and effort to get there. So we decided it would be best to have a more robust conversation in March.
That sounds fine. And could I just ask that we include in that, I didn't raise this on the Maine Working Farmland Access Protection Program, but I did note that they had on page 8, stewardship award would be made post-acquisition. And so I think one of the things that we'll be discussing is the timing of those applications for stewardship. And so I just note that maybe it's post, maybe for some, maybe it's at the same time that the initial request for funding is made, but we should look at that issue too, the timing.
Yeah. Technically, those supplemental awards will be post-acquisition, but it may effectively be, you know, a matter of seconds after.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So that's a good segue to the final staff update, which is that our next board meeting is March 22nd. We do have a March 1st AOC meeting on the books. However, we do not have any appraisals to review for that meeting, so that meeting will be canceled. And that's all I got.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Does any other member of the board have anything prior to adjourning the meeting? Not seeing any other hands. I want to thank everybody for the conversations today. I think it was a good meeting. We got a very solid project out the door, and we've got some more RFPs in the works. So I want to thank you all for that. It was a very good conversation, and I look forward to our next meeting on March 22nd. With that, motion to adjourn would be in order.
So moved.
Motion
Second.
by Barbara, seconded by Roger, and seeing no objections, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day, and be careful out on the roads if you're traveling.
Bye-bye.